Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I pray that you're all doing well and had a good prayer. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has brought us to verse 154 of Surah al-Baqarah. And this verse is a very famous verse in the Quran, talking about the people that have died, that we shouldn't think of them as passing away or dead, but they are living with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we do not necessarily realize it. And it's important to understand that this verse in the Quran is situated in verses regarding sabr. So one fascinating aspect of Surah al-Baqarah is that one of the themes is the idea of sabr, of being patient. So we see in the beginning of Surah al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ إِنَّهَا لَكَبِيرَةٌ إِلَّا عَلَى الْخَاشِعِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we should seek aid with patience and with salah. And this is very important, especially in this time where I know many of us are following the news and seeing what's going on around the world, especially in Gaza and Palestine and in Kashmir and China, other places. That's important that we don't neglect the spiritual aspect of our deen. Yes, of course, we need to do the activism, we need to go out and speak, we need to contact our Congress members, we have to give aid, give our zakah, but at the same time we have to engage in salah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about salah and sabr in the beginning of the surah with وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ, and then again here, right before this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ. So almost exact same phrase, إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with those who are patient. So you see that in the beginning of the surah, it talks about being patient and praying. And then in the middle of the surah, it talks about patience and prayer. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with those who are patient. And then you have this verse. So this verse has to be understood in the context of being patient with the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and being patient with the different trials that you face. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَقُولُوا لِمَن يُقْتَلْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتًا. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, don't think or don't say that the people who died in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are dead. And this is essential because one of the most difficult things about being patient, of course, in terms of losing someone's job, in terms of relationships with relatives, but one of the most challenging aspects of humanity is losing someone that you cared about, whether it's a parent, a sibling, a friend. It's the most difficult thing. Even your child. Some people in our community have lost children. When you have a child, you don't expect to bury them. You expect the child to bury you. But we know the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he lost his own children, and he lost Ibrahim, and he lost other of his children. Even shortly after his death, Fatima radhiallahu anha passed away. So you see that children, even when they are raised, we pray that they have a long life, but everyone is going to die at some point in some time. So in the context of patience, one of the most difficult things is being patient when someone passes away. And one of the aspects Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives here of how should we be patient when someone passes away. Right? That person meant so much to us. They cared for us. They looked for us. We had a particular relationship with them. We loved them. It was one of respect, of honor. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when that person passes away, لا تقولوا لمن يقتل, that this person maybe had died, passed away in terms of sickness, that they're on the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in war, that they're dead. بل أحياء, subhanallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that they are living. So imagine that someone passes away in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And here, it's very specific. It doesn't say shaheed, even though that's many of the mufassirin understand this as the shuhada, the people who witnessed and the martyrs. But it says fi sabilillah, that these people were in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're walking in the path, sirat al-mustaqim. They may have been traveling for a good cause. They have been going to Hajj. They were trying to complete Umrah. They were doing something, looking at the end of the journey, they were seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But then they died. They passed away. They were killed. These people, should we think of them as gone? Yes, they're no longer here on this earth, but that doesn't mean that they're not living. Subhanallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, بَلْ أَحْيَاء وَلَكِنْ لَا تَشْعُرُونَ. Subhanallah. These people who died in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are living, but you don't perceive it. You don't realize it. Yes, they don't sit next to us anymore. Yes, they don't pray with us. Fajr, Salah. Yes, you don't see them at work, or when you go home, they're no longer present. But they are living. But we do not, as humans, perceive it. Allahu Akbar. And this is part of the miracle of the Quran and part of the miracle of Islam, that we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is muhyi, that He has the ability to give life after death. And we've seen this. Many of the doctors in our community, they can tell us stories that they thought someone had passed away, and then all of a sudden they came back to life. And we know part of our deen is Yawm al-Qiyamah. People will stand up and rise again, and they will go to heaven and hell. And then after this verse, which we won't discuss today, but inshallah tomorrow, it says, وَبَشِّرْ الصَّابِرِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we'll try, make people, this life is not easy. That you have fear and you have hunger. You lose money. People will pass away. That there will not have food sometimes to eat. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَبَشِّرَ الصَّابِرِينَ. But give glad tidings to the people who are patient. Here also you see, subhanAllah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about patience in the middle of the surah, but at the end as well. So it's a theme from the beginning, middle, and end. The cohesiveness of Surah Al-Baqarah. Where Dawood alayhi salam, he's fighting. And he's fighting against Jalut. And he says, the people of Dawood alayhi salam, Bani Israel, they say, قَالُوا رَبَّنَا أَفْرِغْ عَلَيْنَا صَبْرًا. They say, Ya Allah, give us patience in the middle of the battle, in the middle of fighting against Jalut. وَثَبِّتْ أَقْدَامَنَا وَانْصُرْنَا عَلَى الْقَوْمِ الْكَافِرِينَ. In the middle of this, they're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give them patience and to make their feet firm, and that they're not wavering, and that they are victorious of those people who disbelieve. Here Imam Tabari, he summarizes several hadith about the idea of someone passing away, but they're living. And a lot of these hadith have to deal with the qabr, the grave. And then you see here that he says, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, أنه وصف حال المؤمنين والكافرين. The part of the mission of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was not only to talk about life and ethics and morality, but he talked about Yawm al-Qiyamah and Akhirah. And he describes the state of the believer and the disbeliever بعد وفاتهم, after they had passed away. فأخبر عن المؤمنين أنهم يفتح لهم من قبورهم أبواب إلى الجنة. And he described, and he said that the believers, that it will be open for them, that they'll be lying in the grave, and a door will open for them to Jannah. SubhanAllah, Allahu Akbar. And they will be able to look and see the Jannah. يشمون منها روحها. And they're able to smell the Jannah and the fruits and the gardens and the food. وَيَسْتَعْجِنُونَ اللَّهِ قِيَامِ السَّاعَةِ. And they're asking Allah, and they're praying, Ya Allah, please bring Yawm al-Qiyamah quickly. I want to go to this Jannah. SubhanAllah, they can see it. When you go into the mall or the shopping area, and you see, they put the door as transparent, as glass. You can look inside and you say, oh, I want this, I want that. Right? You want to go into the store. So they're saying, Ya Allah, make it possible that I can go that. لِيُسِيرُوا إِلَى مَسَاكِنِهِمْ minha, and that they want to go in and see the different houses. So imagine you can see almost a whole neighborhood of people and nice buildings, and you say, oh, I want this house and I want that house. وَيَجْمَعْ بَيْنَهُمْ وَبَيْنَ أَحَالِهِمْ وَأَوْلَادِهِمْ, and that they can gather with their families and their children. Allahu Akbar. Imagine you lost this person, that child, you lost that relative, you lost that companion, that parent. And you see those people and you say, oh, I want to go and spend time with them. And then the opposite for the kuffar. And that for the kuffar, the people who disbelieved and rejected, they have doors open for them and they can see the hellfire. And they look into that, يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَيْهَا وَيُصِيبُهُمْ مِن مَكْرُوهِهَا. And then they can see all the negative things and smell those things that are unpleasant. And they ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَيَسْأَلُونَ اللَّهِ فِيهَا تَأْخِيرَ قِيَامَ السَّاعَةِ. And they ask Allah, please, I don't want the Yawm al-Qiyamah to come, because I see this abode and it's repulsive. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will eventually bring Yawm al-Qiyamah for the believer and the disbeliever. So brothers and sisters in Islam, to conclude for today, these verses, the verse today especially about thinking about the people who died as dead, know that they are living, is part of our patience in our deen. All of us will experience in our life someone who passes away. And many of us here, if we just reflect, we can think of someone immediately who recently even passed away, that we close, that we loved, that we love being in their company and spending time with them. We have to understand that if they were in the sabilillah, if they were in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and they died, then they're ahya, that they're actually living. وَلَكِنْ لَا تَشْعُرُونَ. But we do not perceive it. And that part of the guarantee of our paradise is that we get to spend time with those people. We believe in Yawm al-Qiyamah. We believe that people will stand on the Day of Judgment. And we believe that we were reunited with those people that we no longer have the contact with. And we see that importance of death in Islam. The part of the reality, and one of the beautiful aspects of Islam compared to other religions, is that it talks about the reality of death. Death will occur. And so many verses in the Quran talking about those people who died and those people who are no longer with us. But we have to understand that there is this idea of as-sa'a, the hour, that there is this idea of Jannah and the hellfire, and that yes, death is a part of life, and people will die in this life, and people will be killed. But at the same time, we believe in salat, we believe in sabr, we believe in prayer and patience, along with all the different aspects that we see, mashallah, the Adams doing in terms of advocacy, in terms of activism, in terms of donations. And this is very important, of course, as you know, in the current situation. In the current situation, we see, subhanAllah, every day someone is killed. Every single day someone is killed in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have women, children, civilians. And we ask ourselves, it's a question, how could this happen? What is the theodicy of this? How do we understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed this to happen? But here in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers that and says, don't say those people were killed, that those people who were killed, they're dead. No, they're living. Those people are ahya. They have life, but we don't necessarily perceive it. And we have to have this iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just, He's adil. And that those people who are among the zalimeen, those people who are unjust and transgressors, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will met out justice on Yawm al-Qiyamah fairly and distribute it in the right manner. So we have to understand that in the context of patience and in the context of these global struggles, that we have to engage in sabr and salah and understand that those people who passed away are with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ.